and it must be what I need. And that's not always easy. It's not always easy to accept from His hand. See, we accept good from God's hand without any reticence, but we have a hard time when God has something else for us. But whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth. And so when it's chastening, we say, oh God, what are you trying to do? But if we don't realize that it's Him working in our life for our benefit, that it might produce the peaceable fruit of holiness, then we'll fail to recognize its purpose. So what to do when God's working. Then we looked at what to do when you're being attacked and some things we ought to do then. And then for the last few weeks, we've been looking at what to do when Satan works, when Satan is working in our midst. Because sometimes we think that, and we looked at it last week, this is kind of where we left off, but we forget to realize that if Satan is working, he has permission to do so. Do you understand that the devil needs permission to do what he is doing in your life? Now, a lot of times people blame the devil when the devil didn't have anything to do with it. You understand, we can blame the devil, and the devil's looking around like, that wasn't me. That was all you. In fact, for most of us, we are our own worst enemy, and we do enough on our own that the devil doesn't even have to get involved. We're like, wow, the devil's really after me. No, that was you. All you and nothing but you. The devil's like, look, I don't even have to try with this one. Just leave them alone. They'll do it all on their own. And so we need to recognize that, every man's tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Boy, we think that the tempter's after us, and we don't even realize it's our own flesh. We got to be very careful. But when the devil is coming against us, we realize we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and spiritual wickednesses. And so we recognize that there's a spiritual inference or a spiritual aspect to this warfare that you and I are in, which is why it requires spiritual armor. And over again, that armor was there, and we looked at it a couple weeks ago. It's there so you and I can stand and withstand in the evil day. So what are we supposed to do? Well, don't back up. Don't bow out. Stand. Withstand the barrage. Withstand the fight. Withstand the attack. And listen, it may not be the time that you advance, but don't retreat. It may not be a time when you move forward. It may not be a time when you march in ease, but at least don't back up. At least don't allow the attack of the enemy to cause you to lose ground. And so we want to stand. We want to stand firm, and we want to stand fast. And we looked at that because other people need us to stand. They need us to. The priest stood in the midst of Jordan. They went down into the water, and when they did, when their feet touched the water, the Bible said it parted hither and thither, and they stood on dry ground, and all the people walked through the Jordan on dry ground. And then the children of Israel get to the other side, and the priests who've been standing firm, the Bible said, in the midst of Jordan, then they walk out of Jordan. And you understand that their stand in the midst of that raging, overflowing Jordan River at that time, their stand allowed for others to make it through and go on their way. And so other people need us to stand. Parents, your kids need to see you take a stand. They need to see you stand firm. They need to see you stay faithful and do the things that God's called you to do. They need to see it. But not just our stand, but in the armor that we've been given, we are also given a sword. And so it ought to cause us to recognize that, hey, while we're standing, we can swing back. You understand the devil's after your faith. If he's coming after your faith, you ought to say, wait a minute, if he wants to take my faith, then I'm going to believe more. I'm not going to let him win. I'm not just going to stand here and doubt God. Well, he won. No, I'm going to actually swing back. And while it may not look like anything, it may not feel like it's going to work, it's going to come out exactly as God wants it. I trust him. And so we swing back, and he wants to take your joy. You going to let him? You going to allow circumstances to dictate how you feel? How you doing? I don't know. Let me check my calendar. Oh, it's Monday. I'm having a bad day. Or are you going to swing back and say, you know what, it doesn't matter. He's coming after it. Must mean it's where it needs to be. I'm going to protect it. We're going to fight back. We're going to strive to keep our joy. We're going to strive to keep our peace. We're going to strive to keep our sound mind. Why? Because those are things God's given us, and He's coming after them. We don't want Him to take them. Then we come to the book of Job. Job's facing a day when very clearly the devil, Satan, is working in his life. We know that. Now, at the time, Job didn't know this. You realize these things caught Job by surprise. It didn't catch God by surprise. But the devil was allowed permission to come after Job. And by the end of chapter 1, we find that Job has lost his oxen. He's lost all his cattle. He's lost all his substance, his wealth. He's lost his children. By chapter 2, he's lost his health. Now, I think it is very interesting, as I've been meditating on this week, is found chapter 2, verse 1, says this: again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves. If that is consistent with when the children of Israel came to present themselves before the Lord, it's at least a couple of months. Now, that's not a guarantee that that is the case, but if it is consistent with when they came 3 times in a year. All right, so that's about 4 months. But even if it's just another day that's separate from that, it does not appear that it's the next day. And so for a while, Job is having, between chapter 1 and chapter 2, you got to put yourself into this, the passage here and what it is he's going through. There is a season of time, a long time, where Job is sitting in this loss of all his substance, the loss of his sons, the loss of his daughters, the loss of all he had. He's sitting in it with seemingly no reprieve. And instead of getting blessed, the next thing he faces at some time later was the double barrel. It was the next thing. It was another attack of Satan. It was the other shoe dropped. You ever been just waiting on it? Some people say it this way. People have a tendency to die in threes. Well, that's not true. It's not true at all. You know how I know that? There are thousands of people dying in just the time we've been here. People are dying a whole lot more than threes. But we just have it in our mind that, what's next? If you're not careful, you can start sensationalizing a lot of things. But this was another day when the devil came after Job. And we'll just look in chapter 2, verse 3, because I want to get to what Satan said again. This is where we were last week. The Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? There's none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. See, it's the same thing he had said in chapter 1, that if you just remove the hedge of protection you have on him, you just make things hard on him, and he'll curse you to your face. Obviously, we know that that's not what happened, but it is how the devil thinks. And can I tell you that these hard days, these difficulties in our life, they have to happen. One of the reasons why they have to happen, why we all have to face our day, is because it gives us the opportunity to prove what we believe. It gives us the opportunity to be tested in our love for Him, in our faithfulness to Him. Can I tell you, it is not when it is easy to go to church that your faithfulness to church is tested. You know, when you woke up before the alarm and you didn't even need a cup of coffee, but you had one anyways because it's just so good. And the sun was shining and the birds were singing and everybody stopped on your way to church and motioned you to go. They didn't cut you off. And I mean, it was just, everything was great. The one stoplight in town was green. And it was just wonderful. Everything was great. And you just came. You didn't even have to change your clothes, ladies, 5 times. The very first outfit looked good on you. Your hair just fell in place. It was just a perfect morning. That's not when it's known whether you come to church or not. That's easy. But it's the opposite. It's when Monday came early and it's Sunday morning, but all hell is breaking loose in your house, and you wake up to the sound of the kids screaming at each other, and the toast got burnt and the coffee spilled all over. It's one of those mornings. And you go, you know what? Let's just what? Well, we got to go to church. Why? Because that's what we do. That's where your faithfulness is tested. When you have an infant and they chose Saturday night to be up all hours of the night, and you've gotten approximately 27 minutes of sleep, and you know because you counted, and you're like, my goodness, I'm so exhausted. That's when it's tested. That's when it's tested. It's not when you went to bed at 6 o'clock and you woke up the next morning at 8 and you had 14 hours of sleep and you feel great. And can I say to you, if your faith, if your love, if it cannot be tested, then it cannot be trusted. And so it is an opportunity for us to prove what we say we believe and we know to be true. There's a big difference in saying I'm resting in God in the midst of my storms when the sun is shining. But when it's a storm out in your life and you go, am I really going to rest in God in the midst of this storm or not? That's when it's tested as to who you're going to trust in. But the devil says something here about Job, and he said he would curse him to his face. In chapter 1, he said the same thing. Verse 11, put forth thou thine hand, touch all that he hath, they'll curse thee to thy face. So the devil is highlighting something else that we didn't get to last week that I'm going to spend some time this morning. And this is the final point, whether we finish or not. Here it is. You're getting all of it or none of it, and we'll give you, and we're done. When Satan works, here it is, our speech. Our speech. Not just our stand, not just swinging back, but our speech. And there's something important about this, because in both times, what the devil said that Job would do was curse God to his face. His thought was he would speak wrong. Now, you need to let this sink in, because if that's what the devil thinks, if I give you some adversity, some trial, if I attack and take away things and do these, make it hard, then they're going to say the wrong things. That ought to cause us to go, oh, wait a minute, he's trying to get me to say the wrong thing. What's the wrong thing? How do I avoid it? In fact, not only is it that the devil said that, but I want you to see what God highlights about Job. Look at chapter 1, verse 20. Job arose, rent his mantle, shaved his head, fell down upon the ground and worshipped, and said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. The devil said he was going to curse him to his face, and Job charged God, I'm going to use that, God foolishly. So chapter 2, he said, well, you just take away his health, he'll curse you to your face. And so notice what happens. Verse 7, so went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. He took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Isn't it interesting? She's asking him to do what the devil said he would do. Now, before you think I'm hard on Miss Job, I'm going to show you in just a minute that that's not the case. But So someone else is suggesting, at least in some reasoning, and I would submit to you, she's had a pretty hard go of it. She lost everything in chapter 1, 2, and now here she's watching her husband go through this, and I'd submit it's more of a, why don't you just end it? Look, it's okay. Just give up. You don't have to stand any longer. Just go ahead and quit. Just call it quits. And she cares about him. She doesn't want to see him go through this any longer. But notice his response, verse 10, but he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? Notice this. In all this did not Job sin with his lips. So what is highlighted in Job's happening isn't just how he responded and what he did, but actually what he said. And I think a lot of times we can learn as Christians to handle the attacks better than we can learn to not say the wrong things while they're happening. Sometimes we can handle the attack and we're still here, but we say the wrong things. Because the devil was coming after Job, and he said, he'll curse you to your face, and that's what's highlighted. But in all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. He sinned not with his lips. And it's an emphasis on what he said. And so I want you to see some things about our speech. I've got 3 points in this. If we get to all of them, you'll know we're done. If we don't, we'll be done anyway. Number 1, speak not foolishly. Speak not foolishly. The Bible said in chapter 1, verse 22, nor charged God foolishly. Then what is highlighted in verse 9, verse 10, he said that his wife speaketh as one of the foolish women speaketh. And can I tell you that what is interesting here is this: if she was a fool, this wouldn't have surprised him. This verse actually indicates that she's not foolish, because he didn't say, you're speaking like your foolish self. What he is saying is that how she said right here in verse 9, curse God and die, was not like her, but the events of chapter 1 and 2 have caused her to speak like the fools speak. And that's not something Mrs. Job was known for doing. But instead of acting in character, the pressure has caused her to act out of character. And as a result, she charged or spake foolishly. And Job corrects her on that. Why? Because we're not to speak foolishly when Satan is working. So what does it mean to speak foolishly? Well, here we find some things. Cursing God, charging God. Right? And so we're going to look at a few of these this morning. Like I said, I've got 3 points. I've got 15 sub-points, and we'll be done. No, not quite. 16, right? Amen. So here's the thing. Will you blame God? Charge Him. Will you blame Him in that day? Why is this happening? God, why did you do this to me? Will you blame Him, or will you believe Him? What? Shall we receive good at the hand of the Lord? Shall we not receive evil? Do you understand? This is the contrast of verse 9 and 10. Notice it again. Then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? And all this did not Job sin with his lips. You're going to have to decide, are you going to blame him for your situation, or are you going to believe him? See, it's hard to believe that God's doing you good when it seems like you're receiving evil. When you lose your job, it doesn't seem like God's being real good to you. When someone's close to you loses their life, it doesn't feel like Boy, God's just wrapping His loving arms around me right now. But if we are to accept that our grandbabies are a precious gift from God, then losing our grandparents is as much from Him. Do you understand? You can't accept that grandbabies being born is of the Lord and not accept that grandmother dying is of the Lord. That's what He's saying. And yet what we'll do is we'll take credit for grandbaby and blame grandma on God. When it's good, of course it happened. God bless me. When it's bad, how could you? I'm blaming you. There's something interesting about this. Job's response in chapter 1 in verse 21 said this: naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return hither. The Lord gave, the Lord hath taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord. We highlighted this, but I'm just going to reinforce it this morning. Pay attention now, listen, consider. If you have clothes on today, I don't care how much you've lost, you're actually at a net plus from where you started. See, here's what happens a lot of times. We start at ground zero with nothing. Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. We started with absolutely nothing. And then what happened is this happened. And when this takes place, we blame God and say, how could you take everything away from me, without realizing that this isn't where you started, this was. You say, God, you just keep taking things. But if you have clothes on your back tonight, this morning, I mean, if you have absolutely nothing but a shirt on your back, you realize you have more than you started with? You haven't lost. You haven't even gotten back to zero yet. But what we think is this is what we think. God has done this, but when something happens, maybe we do lose grandma. Here's where we think we are. But that's not reality. So you're going to blame God, or are you going to believe in God? Are you going to bemoan God? What do you mean? Complain. You see, you're going to charge Him foolishly? Are you going to complain about your situation? Numbers 11, verse 1. This is what the children of Israel did. If you're familiar, you don't have to turn back there, but Numbers 11 says this in verse 1. When the people complained, it displeased the Lord. The Lord heard it, and His anger was kindled. And the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. Can I tell you that God was blessing His people? He's feeding them with manna in the wilderness. It's a miraculous provision. And yet, what they were crying about was, well, we don't have the leeks and garlic of Egypt. We're at a net loss here. I can't believe God's doing this to us. And they began to bemoan and complain about their situation. And woe is me. And oh, it's just not fair. And why is God doing this to us? And it displeased the Lord. You know what that is? That's foolish speaking. I want you to know that there is a distinct and clear difference between chronicling something, the events that have happened, and complaining about them. Job 1 lists what Job lost. But you don't have Job complaining about what he lost. There's a difference between telling someone what has happened to you and complaining about it. There's a difference. But if you're not careful, dwelling on it and rehashing it over and over can cause us to go from chronicling it, telling somebody, to complaining about it. We say, well, how do you know? Typically, it comes with a why. This, and this happened. Why did it have to happen to me? You see the shift? This, and this happened. How could he? This, and this. What? You better be very careful when Satan's attacking, not just that your actions are right, but your words are right. Because God's watching them. That's what's highlighted in Job. Will you deny Him, or will you depend on Him? Will you blame Him for your situation, or will you bless Him? Will you bemoan Him, or will you believe in Him? Cling to Him. Will you deny Him, or will you depend on Him? Now watch, come with me to Luke 22. I'm going to show you this. Luke 22. Luke 22, look at verse 31. I've been quoting this verse to you this whole message, trying to get to here. The Lord said unto Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. That verse has always amazed me because I'm telling you, if I was Peter, my next response would be, you told him no, right? Jesus just said, hey, Simon, Satan asked me permission to come after you. You're like, you did tell him no, correct? No. He's like, but I prayed for you. Look at it, verse 32. But I prayed for thee. Now, this isn't, the Christian excuse to not do anything. This is Jesus. He actually prayed for him. How many of you have been guilty of that one? I prayed for you. Really? Come on now. How many of you going to be honest enough this morning and say, if you don't pray for him right then and there, you forget to pray for him most of the time? I prayed for you. No, he said, hey, Satan had desired to have thee to sift thee as wheat, but I prayed for thee. Why? That thy faith fail not. See, that's what he's coming after. Now notice what he said. And when thou art converted, strengthen the brethren. And he said unto him, this is Peter's response. You ready? Here comes some foolish speaking. Notice what he said. Lord, I'm ready to go with thee both into prison and to death. And he said, I tell thee, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before thou shalt thrice deny that thou knowest me. In Matthew, you know him when he says, not so, Lord. That ain't happening to me. No, I'm not going to. And I tell you, one of the things we do that's so foolish is we deny. The first thing we do is we deny. I think it's interesting that Peter denied that he would deny and then denied the Lord 3 times. When God says, watch out for this, and you go, it ain't going to happen to me, guess what's coming down your pike, bud? You get mad when someone gives you the warning sign and not listen. Can I tell you, that's foolish speaking. Are you going to deny him? Or are you going to depend on him? That night, when Jesus is there all by himself, facing the Sanhedrin, Peter's standing without. Wouldn't it have been a wonderful testimony to have said, if you're Peter, hey, I was right there with him? Wouldn't that have been a blessing? I stood for him. I stood with him. I stayed firm. I stayed faithful to the very end. But he can't say that. You know what he said? I spoke foolishly. Because when the heat got turned up and somebody said, weren't you with him? That's when his stand was put to the test. That's when whether or not he was going to stay faithful was tested. See, it's not tested when they're walking by the Sea of Gennesaret together. It's tested when the enemy comes out. And listen, then is when, are you going to stay with him? You're going to deny him? You're going to depend on him? By the end of it all, Peter runs out and weeps bitterly. Why? Because he failed the test. Here's the blessing with that. Even when you fail the test, the Lord said, when thou art converted, what? There's more for you to do on the other side of it. I'll come back one more place in Deuteronomy chapter 1. We'll come back to Deuteronomy 1 first and then Job, and we'll give you the next 2 points quicker than this first one. Deuteronomy chapter 1. The end of verse 25 says, it's a good land which the Lord our God doth give us. Moses is given an account of what has transpired. Verse 26, notwithstanding, ye would not go up, but rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God, and ye murmured in your tents, there's your complaining, and said, because the Lord hated us, there's your blaming him, right? Because the Lord hated us, he hath brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to deliver us in the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. Whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our heart. So do you understand? Here's the third thing. Are you going to discourage others in the midst of your day? See, here are these people who have been bemoaning and blaming God. They're going through a bad day, and just how awful God's been in their life and how miserable it is to be a child of God in the wilderness. And they can't even believe. They just rather have gone back to Egypt. They just wanted the things of the world. And you know what it caused others to do? Look, instead of taking a stand and standing fast and saying, you know what? The devil might be coming, but listen, this is worth fighting for. We're going to stand in our piece of ground, and we're going to fight for the barley. And we're going to fight for the lentils. We're going to fight for the fruit of the ground. Hey, it's worth it, kids, to stand for God and see somebody that's taking a stand. Now these are complaining, and they're murmuring, and they're backbiting, and they're bemoaning God, and they're blaming him for everything. And God's never done me any good, and woe is me. And as a kid, it caused them to go, well, we don't want that. And it discouraged the hearts of their brethren. They're going through it, and instead of handling it well, it causes others to go, I don't want to go through that. Come back to Job, and I'll show this to you in chapter 4. Job 4. You better be careful how you speak in your day. Speak not foolishly. Don't curse God. Don't charge him foolishly. Don't complain. Don't condemn. When someone's going through their day, don't condemn them. Notice what happened. See, this was the discouraging part for Job. His friends showed up, and this is what their response was. This is foolish speaking. Chapter 4. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, if we essay to commune with thee, wilt thou be grieved? Can I just tell you something real quick? Don't get mad. That's what he's saying, okay? That's what that meant. Hey, don't get mad at me, but I got to tell you something. Who can withhold himself from speaking? Actually, I can't shut up. I have to tell you. I mean, that's what he's saying here, okay? You say, why is that important? Because here's our next point. Not only are you supposed to speak foolishly, but you should speak few words. Speak not foolishly, but speak few words. I'll show you that in just a minute. But now here it is. Behold, verse 3, thou hast instructed many, and thou hast strengthened the weak hands. So you've instructed. Thy words have upholden him that was falling, and thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. But now it's come upon thee, and thou faintest. It toucheth thee, and thou art troubled. So here you are telling others to stand for God, and now when it's happening, your knees are buckling, Job. That's what he's saying. Why? Job's being tested. Because you're telling others, hey, you can trust God with your life. Job says, and God says, can you, Job? You're telling others you can live for, can you, Job? And now his friends are saying, you told others, but now when it comes to you, you're all complaining. Verse 6, is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, the uprightness of thy ways? Remember, I pray thee. Boy, here's where he really gets off. Remember, I pray thee, whoever perished being innocent, or where were the righteous cut off? You mean Abel? They know about Adam and Eve. Job mentions them at the end of the chapter 23, I think. They know that. But here's what he said. Now, he doubles down on it. Verse 8, even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. His next friend's going to stand up and say, you know what, Job, it's because your sons were evil. That's why they died. And Job's like, miserable comforters are ye all. You know what they did? They were discouraging to Job. You realize Job hasn't sinned or charged God foolishly in all of this? And yet here comes the condemnation of others. Wow, you're going through it. You must have sin in your life. Hey, speak not foolishly when you're going through your day or when someone else is going through theirs. When you hear someone's facing a lot all at once, the very first thing, hey man, I hear you're really going through it. What'd you do? Well, I'm fixing to do something, what'd you do? Shouldn't even be in your thought process. Mr. Pious. Eliphaz. Go to chapter 42. Look who God's mad at. Chapter 42. Verse 7. It was so that after the Lord had spoken these words unto Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, you see this same guy. And by the way, same account. This is why he says this. Our chapter 4. My wrath is kindled against thee and against thy two friends, for ye have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job hath. Do you understand what God's mad at? Is what he said in the day of his trouble. He was mad at what they said. You better get a hold of this, because we think that as long as I do the right thing, I'm going to be okay. But God was mad at them for what they said in Job's day. You better be careful how you speak. Speak not foolishly. Don't be a discourager. Encourage. Comfort. Edify. All right, number 2, not just speak not foolishly. Come back to Job 2. I'm going to give you this one, and then I'll probably just close with a simple thought out of the third point. So here's the second point. Speak few words. So number 1 is speak not foolishly. Number 2 is speak few words. Speak few words. What do you mean? Hey, you don't have the answers. You don't have the answers. You're going through it. You're not sure. Job's not even aware of the conversation at this point between God and the devil. Do you realize that? So instead of just running your mouth about things you don't understand, just keep your mouth shut. Here was how Job kept from sinning with his lips. You ready? We'll look at, after all that in verse 9 and 10, now when Job's 3 friends, verse 11, heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came everyone from his own place. Eliphaz, Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, he's the shortest man in your Bible, Zophar the Naamathite. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off and knew him not, they lifted up their voice and wept. They rent everyone his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. You understand, for 7 days, here his friends came. He didn't say a word. You know why? Because had he, just like you, he'd have said the wrong thing. A lot of times the problem is we're going through it, and instead of just keeping our mouth shut, we open it up and let our foolishness come out. But even a fool, Proverbs 17, when he withhold it, right? When he, I'm butchering it, thinking of a different verse now. I'm going to look that one up because I can't come up with it. It's Proverbs 17:28. Even a fool when he holdeth his peace is counted wise. He that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. Speak few words. Do you understand? God wouldn't have had to have gotten on to Eliphaz if Eliphaz hadn't have given his 2 cents. Here's what he said. But who can withhold himself from speaking? Oh, I just have to say, no, you don't. Hey, listen. Job's wife, going through it. Why don't you just curse God and die? You know what that outburst was? It was out of character. It was. He didn't say, why are you speaking that way, you foolish woman? He said, you're speaking like the foolish women. What are you doing, honey? This isn't like you. That's what he's saying. Well, of course, because in the midst of her hurt, she opened her mouth, and all that came out was foolish. And it had been better for her just to have spoken fewer words. You say, didn't she say little? It would have been wiser to say nothing. But Proverbs also says this, the man that heareth speaketh constantly. You know what would have been better for Job? If after 7 days, his friend said, you okay? Need to talk? Not, are you done griping and complaining about this? This is your own fault. You realize that even if someone's actions did wind them up in the place that they are, what good is you condemning them about it? Giving comfort. When you don't know the situation, the best counsel is silence. Oh, I think you should. Yeah, because you know everything. Not only should you speak not foolishly, speak few words. Here's the third point. We're done. Speak friendly. Speak friendly. Here's what I mean. Job's wife. You know what Job needed? You know what he needed? He needed his spouse just as much as Job's wife needed hers. They're going through it. The Bible said that he was estranged from his wife. She's mad at him because he won't just quit. He won't just give up and end it all. Then his friends come, and you would expect that friends would speak friendly. Isn't that kind of what you would expect a friend to be, is friendly? And yet, here's what he said, miserable comforters are ye all. Boy, y'all ain't helping me at all. I was glad you guys showed up, but could you leave now? I mean, 7 days you're doing good when you didn't say a word, but after that, boy, it was problems. In fact, the interesting thing is, the only part in all this that Job messes up at all is when he's finally responding to his friends. Speak friendly. So here it is. Simon, Simon, Satan hath desired to have thee, sift thee as wheat. But I've prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. Listen now. And when thou art converted, snap at the brethren. Tell them off. None of them stood with him either. Boy, lay into him about abandoning me in the garden. No. You know what he said? Strengthen the brethren. Isn't it interesting? He used the one that denied him to encourage the others. It's 1 Peter 5. It is. When he's going through there about your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion walking about, seeking whom he may devour. Verse 7, where he talks about casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. I mean, all that. And then he says, look, he's coming after you. And after you've suffered a while, boy, that's encouraging. No, it is. Why? The Lord will make you perfect. Establish, strengthen, settle you. Hey, get to the other side of it. Stay standing. And he's got kind words, friendly words. Do you understand? A lot of times when we have a lot happen to us, we use that as an excuse for us speaking wrong. You get snappy and you say, well, I just have a lot. I'm just under a lot of stress. Look, that's not an excuse for using our words the wrong way. In fact, that's what the whole thing with Job was all about. He's looking at your words. Because just because you've had your day doesn't mean you now have carte blanche to say everything and anything you want. And can I just throw this out there? We're not even in the realm of you know, stubbed your toe or hit your finger and the curse words came out. I'm talking about we're beyond that. And still, he's watching our speech. Do you represent him correctly to those who are going through it? You know what he was mad at Eliphaz? He didn't speak of him that which was right. Eliphaz, you didn't represent me correctly to Job. So look at here. Come to 1 Thessalonians 3. Let me show you this. 1 Thessalonians 3. Give me 3 places of Scripture and I'll be done. 1 Thessalonians. Chapter 3. We'll show you all these points of what Satan's working found in this one passage right here. Look at it. Wherefore, when we could no longer forbear, we thought it good to be left at Athens alone, and sent Timotheus, our brother, the minister of God, and our fellow laborer in the gospel of Christ, to establish you and to comfort you concerning your faith, that no man should be moved by these afflictions. So stand, right? Don't be moved. That no man should be moved by these afflictions. For yourselves know that we were appointed thereunto. For verily, when we were with you, we told you before that we should suffer tribulation, even as it came to pass, and you know. For this cause, when I could no longer forbear, I sent to know your faith, lest by some means the tempter have tempted you, and our labor be in vain. But now, when Timotheus came from you unto us, and brought us good tidings of your faith and charity, and that ye have good remembrance of us always, desiring greatly to see us as we also to see you. Therefore, brethren, we were comforted over you in all our affliction and distress by your faith. For now we live if ye stand fast in the Lord. What thanks can we render to God again for you, for all the joy wherewith we joy for your sakes before our God, night and day, praying exceedingly that we might see your face and might perfect that which is lacking in your faith Now God himself and our Father and our Lord Jesus Christ direct our way unto you, and the Lord make you to increase and abound in love one toward another and toward all men, even as we do toward you. To the end he may establish your hearts unblameable in holiness before God, even our Father, at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ with all his saints. So verse 5, Satan's working, lest the tempter have tempted you, right? He's clearly coming after your faith. I wanted to know your faith, lest he came and our labor was in vain. So he's coming after you. So what should you do? Verse 8, hey, for now we live if you stand fast in the Lord. There you are, you're standing fast. And what a blessing that is. And listen, they don't have it all figured out. But verse 10, night and day praying exceedingly that we might see your face and might perfect that which is lacking in your faith. Here is a group of people going through it. Here is Paul going through it. And here's what he said. Hey, when we get to the other side of this, we want to actually be bettered for it and perfect that which is lacking on the other side of it and not go backwards, but actually forward. And so we're going to swing back. And I promise you, when I get there, we're going to help you. And it'll be a blessing to you. And when you get to the other side of the struggle and get to the other side of the tempter tempting you, we'll be better for it. But in the meanwhile, verse 12, he said, make your love increase and abound one to another. So right in the midst of all this affliction and all this persecution and all this tribulation, here's what he said. It's not the time to be bickering back and forth, to be snippy with each other. It's actually the time that your love increase and abound one to another. How you communicate with each other ought to be better. Why? Because you're going through it. So we rely on old thumper theology. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Some of you are like, who's Thumper? Y'all need to go watch Bambi if you don't know who Thumper is. You can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Why? Speak few words, but speak friendly. So 1 Peter, here's our example. 1 Peter chapter 2. Here, 1 Peter 2, and then one more place and we're done. 1 Peter 2. Verse 21, for even hereunto art were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. There's no foolish speaking in his mouth. You understand that? 23, who when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. Do you understand? What he did was he blessed. You know what he said? Father, forgive them. You know what he said? Today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Here he is facing all that Satan had to throw at him in the garden. You know the first word out of his mouth when Judas comes to him? You know what it was? It wasn't betrayer. It wasn't backstabber. It wasn't you low down, good for nothing. No, you know what it was? Friend. His friend. And he didn't say that smirkingly, sarcastically. No. He spoke friendly. 1 Corinthians 4. And we're done. 1 Corinthians 4. Verse 9, for I think that God has set forth us, the apostles, last, as it were appointed to death. This is Paul talking. For we were made a spectacle unto the world, and to angels, and to men. We are fools for Christ's sake. Ye are wise in Christ. We're weak, but ye are strong. Ye are honorable, but we're despised. Even unto this present hour we both hunger and thirst, and are naked, and are buffeted, and have no certain dwelling place, and labor, working with our own hands, being reviled. What do? He said, we bless. Being persecuted, we suffer for it, or we suffer it. Being defamed, we entreat. We're made as the filth of the world and are the offscouring of all things unto this day. I write not these things to shame you, but as my beloved sons, I warn you. You say, what's the warning? Hey, it's coming. It's coming to you. So when that happens, don't speak foolishly. If you have to, speak few words. When you speak friendly. Why? Because other people need to know when you're going through it, when you stand, they need to know, hey, he can give comfort and joy and help in the midst of heartache. You see someone going through it, and Satan's attacking, and they're really getting beat up, and you're going, my goodness, I don't know how they can make it. And you go, hey, brother so-and-so, you okay? Yeah, it's wonderful serving God. Everybody should do it. You go, yeah, I'm not sure about that. You call up sister so-and-so, say, hey, how are you? And boy, they're panicked about everything. Oh, the election. All this, all that, all this. Oh, I can't sleep at night. I'm so worried. I got this, I got that, I got this. And oh, my goodness. And oh, I can't believe this. And you go, where's the peace? And then look, so when they say, but don't worry, God, the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ. You go, that's the peace of God? Listen, no, that's not it. That's not the peace of God. When you call up somebody, or you see someone who's going through it, and they lose everything, they're being attacked by the devil, and it seems like all hell's breaking loose in their life, and they stand up and say, I just got to tell y'all, God is so good. He's so kind. We serve a good God. And you sit there and you go, how could they say that in all of that? And I'm telling you, it'll do something for you. It'll encourage you. It'll edify you. You say, hey, we do serve a good God. That's exactly what Job did. He worshiped. He said, blessed be the name of the Lord. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of the Lord? Shall we not receive evil? He said, no, we're going to keep serving. We're just going to stay faithful. I don't understand it all. I really don't. Some of you have asked, why is this having to happen? I don't know the answer to that. Be careful not to speak foolishly. Don't charge God. Don't complain. Learn to rely on Him. Rest in Him. When you do speak, speak friendly. Other folks are going through it. You know, one of the things that amazes me is on around chapter, I think it's in chapter 20, or maybe it's 17. Job's like, I entreated my wife for the sake of my children. You know what he did? He said, man, that woman's going through it. She lost her kids. I had to check on her, see how she's doing. You ever have somebody you know is going through so much more than you? Check on you to see how you are. Hey, are you okay? You're like, man, what are you asking me for? You're the one that's going through it. I've been concerned. What a blessing. Isn't that encouraging? You understand, if we would get that mentality, that maybe the day of our greatest afflictions, the day of our greatest comfort. 2 Corinthians 1, Paul said that God's able to comfort you with the same comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted. Let's make sure our speech is right. Because the passage of Job and the events of Job's life declare that God's not just watching what we do, but He's listening to what we say. Let's stand to our feet.